Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm Karen Weaver. It's a time for choosing in higher education and college sports. It's a time to assess the new landscape and decide where your institution can best fit today, not where it was 15 or 20 years ago. It's a time to decide if a Division I membership is still the best fit in today's world. My guest today is Father Malachi Van Tassell. We're going to go by Malachi, who's the current president at St. Francis University. Malachi has been in the office since 2014, which in this world is a fairly long time, and he knows his institution well. Malachi, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Karen. It's great to be with you. It's been an exciting week on our campus, and happy to take the time to join you on this
Well,
podcast.
we're so grateful because I know people will have a lot of interest in your decision and perhaps are contemplating it. So let's start there. Many of my listeners are other university leaders who may be thinking about something similar for their campuses. You've said the driver for us is the student athlete experience. We're not one of the smallest, if not the smallest, in Division I. So start there. Where did this come from?
Okay, well, we have a great history of being Division One. We've been D1 for decades, and I've been at St. Francis for 23 years. I started as a faculty member, and and in the 11 years now that I've been president, I've always been talking about how great it is to be a both and institution. We're both D1 and a small school. At St. Francis, you can be a D1 softball player and be a nursing major.
Yeah.
But in recent years, as I think, so many people appreciate, you know, D1 has changed, between transfer portal, NIL, employment laws, et cetera. Simply put, D1 changed around us, and so in recent years, especially when the transfer portal liberalized, we started to do some soul searching, because D1 has always been good for us, but now we're saying, okay, there's a lot of factors here outside of our control. Life as a D1 institution is going to get more difficult, more expensive. So we really started to do some soul searching.
So give us a quick snapshot for my listeners. Talk about enrollment traditions, your typical student, where you attract them from, what region of the country, and then we'll talk about the enrollment cliff.
Oh, sure thing. We have a long history in Western Pennsylvania. We're located an hour and a half east of Pittsburgh. We're an hour and a half south of Penn State, which is our closest D1 competitor. We've been here though since 1847. So we started as a small agricultural school back in 1847, and then over the decades, we have evolved into the school that we are now. We have about 2,100 students. About 2/3 of our students are in the health sciences. We're known for our PA program. And we have a robust school of business, a great school of STEAM. The typical kid comes from Western Pennsylvania. Okay, so our typical students, 70%, give or take, are from Western PA. And the interesting piece, though, as a D1 institution, it's the D1 that attracts, are you ready for this? 40% of our undergraduate population is a student athlete. Okay,
Wow.
so 40%.
That's pretty large. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so with an undergrad population of 1,600, well, that is beyond significant.
Yes.
And then so we've always known that it's an expensive operation, that it's a big part of what we do, but it's also been a great enrollment driver. And it brings us the type of student that is competitive, a good academic student, and just an all-around great fit for the institution. Back in the 60s, we had a lot of liberal arts majors here. But then in 1979, that's when we brought in a lot of health sciences, made a pivot then. And then over the years have really gotten all in on the D1 piece. So that's a bit about who we are. We have 23 sports on the D1 level.
Wow.
Okay, and that attracts students from about 25 states and probably an equal number of foreign countries. Right, 100% of our international students are D1 athletes at St. Francis.
How about that?
Okay,
How
so
about
so
that?
it's an interesting fabric, for a small school like us.
And many folks would say that that brings another layer of intentionality to your student campus, your student body, about seeing the world in a more broader way.
Yes, yes, because that's like with any small campus in a rural area, you want obviously to broaden students' horizons, and whether that's through having a study abroad program or bringing in students from other countries and even just other parts of the country, that's good for everybody, obviously just on a social level.
Absolutely. So we've all been hearing about the enrollment cliff in the New England, Mid Atlantic, Upper Midwest. So you're almost smack in the center of some of this.
We sure are.
How did that impact your thinking on this?
Well, see, here's the piece. For years, we would always double down on D1. So during the economic downturn of 2008, 2009, we added sports.
Okay.
Okay. And our student population increased in that short period of time. So we weathered that storm by using D1 athletics as an enrollment driver. And then to present day, we've always been aware of this cliff, and so we're always asking those questions like, should we continue to use athletics to be the enrollment driver? And do we add sports? But by going in the direction that we are going in, that is it obviously moves us away from D1, but it doesn't change the reality of the enrollment demographic. One of the pieces that we think by becoming what I'm saying is a premier D3 institution in Western Pennsylvania, that's going to help us weather the cliff. We want students now to come to St. Francis for a premier championship D3 experience. And I believe if we have a great program on offer, that's going to attract the students. St. Francis now is open up to D3 students in the western region of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Anecdotally, there would be D3 kids who said, well, I want to go to St. Francis, but I'm not a D1 athlete. Well, I think in some ways we have a larger pool now to draw from,
Interesting.
as we move into the D3 world.
Interesting. Give us an idea of what your thinking is financially, enrollment wise moving forward. Obviously, I read that you're going to allow athletes who want to continue on their athletic scholarships to receive them, but not compete, is my understanding. And you're also going to start as a member of the PAC conference in 2026. Is that
That's
right?
correct. Yeah,
Okay.
there's a few things at play there. We're going to be D1 for one more year.
Okay.
And we didn't want to make this more abrupt of a change than necessary. It's shocking enough for our current students. But our thinking was, let's stay D1 for one more year. It allows us to really end D1 on a high note, and it gives our students the opportunity to win one more year to win championships. For those undergrad, those maybe freshmen and sophomores, they can have a good final D1 showing at St. Francis if they want to, and then they could transfer somewhere else if they want to. So part of it is, just to create a runway for that. And then the other piece was there's a Franciscan component to this, an ethical component. We realize that this could cause a hardship for our student athletes. And so we're doing everything we can to keep them whole economically,
Okay.
And so we have said to them, if you want to enter the transfer portal, as soon as it opens, you enter it. And, we will not remove you from the roster and we will not penalize you or remove your scholarship. So we're being very kind and very generous. And there too, if a student wants to stay here and you continue in a sport or not, we're going to work with them to make sure that that's an affordable option for them to stay. Okay, so really we're looking at it. We want to care for the current student athlete, make sure that they have a good handle on their options, and then work with them. Obviously, I hope everybody stays,
Of
but I
course.
respect the fact, folks are going to want to go to a D1 school, and we'll accommodate that. We'll help them make that transition.
Right, right. And one of the things you mentioned in one of your comments to a news outlet was the fact that the NEC, the Northeastern Conference, their geographic footprint had changed as well. You are
It
now
has.
going to Chicago and other places that you went to that are much further than you used to travel. So that played a role in this too, right?
And that's the thing, and as I've said to my D1 colleagues, because I've spoken to the presidents of the various D1 schools in the Northeast Conference, it was it's not, it was one of those things where the world has changed around us. And when we've always been, kind of the geographic outlier in the Northeast Conference. And we've always worked with that, because that conference was so strong competitively and academically. The Northeast Conference was the right conference for us when we're D1. In other words, I would have never entertained the thought of leaving the Northeast Conference for another D1 conference. It was the right fit for us. But there too, the geography did expand. The conference now stretches from Boston to Chicago, which is great from a marketing point of view. That's great
Yeah,
exposure.
yeah.
I mean, that's great and great opportunity for students. But just, from a student athlete welfare perspective, that's a lot of time that a student spends traveling, and not on a campus or not doing, another activity. So there was certainly a sensitivity to that as well. But if it wasn't for things like the transfer portal or NIL, we could very well still be remaining in the Northeast Conference in D1. So again, it's really more of the external forces that really tipped the scale. The geography of the Northeast Conference has always been big. We've worked with that, but it was the outside factors really that tipped the scale.
So take us back. Obviously this NIL piece started in 2021. We're looking at the House settlement possibility in the next 10 days. So this has been an evolving kind of crisis, if you will, over the last 3-4 years. How have you and your board approached this? I'm sure you had multiple discussions. You had to really get your board up to speed with what all these changes were and what they meant for your institution. Walk us through that process.
I really appreciate that because this change really began with the board. If you were to talk to a person on the campus, especially anyone in athletics, obviously they're all going to want to stay D1. And even our campus community, D1's in our DNA. So, campus community has said over the years, do we stay D1, go D3, but never with any degree of seriousness. So that's a conversation that had to start at the board level because that's an institutional level decision. And, I think at every board meeting, somewhere along the way, even in one of the breaks or at a cocktail party, someone would say, gosh, what would it be like to be D3? But we never entertained it with any amount of depth. Or I shouldn't say never. There was always, it was, there would be varying degrees of depth of conversation on that. But it was about, I'd say about 2 years ago, round about the time the transfer portal liberalized. That's when I had what I call a fireside chat with my board of trustees. So we did one of the committees of the whole. Every trustee was there, and I brought in members of the president's council. So I had various vice presidents in the room, and I said, "Look, folks, let's just chat." Because what I noticed was trustees had varying degrees of knowledge of what it even meant to be D1, let alone what that meant for St. Francis. The other thing is 2/3 of my board are alumni, which is great. Some of them were student athletes themselves, but they were looking at it through the lens of their own experience
Yes.
in the 1970s. So we needed to start by educating our trustees of this is what it's like on ground in St. Francis. And so it started with board education, anything from the basics, like what is NIL, to the complexities of the economics of over rostering, that kind of thing. So we really had to give the picture of the reality of how we do things now, and then that's really what started a much more in-depth conversation over a period of time.
It's fascinating to me how almost prescient you were in the amount of education you had to provide to your board members, because you're right. I hear that consistently from other presidents. Our board is grounded in the 1960s or the 1970s. They want it to be their experience, and you really had to navigate that.
Yes, yes. And again, and these are people who love the institution. Obviously that's they're why they're on the board. They love the place. But it was really, and part of it was, we as the administration, because we're working in this in the day to day, we just kind of know things reflexively. It's just part of but we had to educate the board to say, no, this is the difference in terms of scholarshiping models, or even the psyche of a D1 athlete versus a D3 athlete. And so that really was the setting of the table to then go and do the in-depth study of, should it be D1, should it be another D1 conference, should it be D3, D2, et cetera, because then everybody was starting on the same level playing field. They had the same, we had level set knowledge and level set expectations.
When I talk to other presidents about their boards, so many times they don't feel like their board's on the same page. And maybe it's because of their political interests or their financial interests, or they just love their team so much they don't want to see their team go backwards and that
Right.
type of thing. But it sounds like you already developed a nice rapport, relationship with your board, that they trusted that if you were bringing that to the table, that it was important for the institution.
And thank you for that. Because having been president now for like going on 11 years, at this point, our trustees, our folks, on the board that I've invited to join the board, and that I've had the opportunity to develop really strong relationships with. Where so as a small private school, that's a luxury that I have versus say an institution that's a state institution where political appointees are on the trustees, that kind of thing.
Definitely.
And so that trust factor had been developed over a number of years. And so the board, myself and the administration, we, especially now, really are a cohesive group that are like-minded. I have to say too, I have a board who has no problem pushing back and who asks the tough questions. And believe me, this was no rubber stamp. And this was at various points in this process. Sometimes, you know, it was too close to call in terms of what we might do or not do. So the point is, they really wrestled with this and they asked the tough questions, and it was factual. There was emotion because of people's experiences and so forth. So, this was, people with their own ideas and their own expertise. And it really was a great mix of, ironing, sharpening iron, and people coming to a good decision together.
It's fascinating. Now, I looked back in your background, and in your previous life, you were an FAR, a faculty
Yes,
athletics
yes,
representative, right?
yes.
So that gave you sort of insight into the world of the NCAA and how it works. I'm sure you attended conference meetings as an FAR or
I did,
national
yes.
meetings. Walk us through what that perspective brought to your conversations.
And it's funny, when I was my predecessor, Father Gabe Zeiss, he was the one who appointed me the FAR. And as a junior faculty member, who was, kind of still setting up his computer, I didn't know what an FAR was, and here, looking back, 23 years later, it's like, well, that really set the stage. And here, another one of those prescient moments, that really, it gave me an inside look, in terms of the world of athletics. But most importantly, I really got to see things from the student athlete perspective, and then really got to see it from the perspective here, as a faculty member, and how academics interact with athletics and so forth. So really, that really did set the stage because I was the FAR for a couple of terms, for a few years there, and it was funny, even when I became president, maybe out of habit, introduced me as the FAR. And I used to be, and I love but I'm the president now, but thank you. But yeah, it was a positive affiliation with athletics.
Absolutely.
And it really helped because when I became president, I became known very quickly as a pro athletics president, somebody
Interesting.
who appreciated that. But no, but my time as FAR was great. I really got to meet a lot of, other FARs within the conference, and, gave me some perspective and some insights that really kind of helped along the way, even now in the presidency.
So I'm wondering what your faculty, since we're talking about faculty, what your faculty think about this big decision, and
Right.
did they have a chance to weigh in before you announced it, that type of thing?
That's a great question. It was a board level decision, and, so, and athletics even, was not a part of the early discussions, so athletics was given the opportunity, to weigh in, fairly late in the process. And, but really, it was not a faculty involved process though either. So really, and there too, we took it from the approach of mission. This was a board level decision. It had to do with mission and direction of the institution, especially because this was going to change, is going to change the fabric and the culture of the institution. And it was that kind of that tricky thing, because if you bring people in too early in the process, you don't want to trigger any alarm bells, especially if you don't go down a certain course of action. But at a certain point, right, then it was time to bring in others to that conversation.
Yeah.
But originally, too, you asked about, faculty reaction. I think faculty too heard this for the first time on Tuesday. And so it's mixed, but I think in an appropriate way. I think, their faculty love our student athletes, and there's a lot of great interaction with teams. We have faculty athletic mentors assigned to each of the teams, and,
Great.
and faculty members who are chaplains. So right now, it's really, there's an emotional component to this. But I want to believe too, from what I'm hearing, faculty are saying, hey, it's a tough decision, it's a sad decision, but it's necessary. And again, because they realize the world of D1 has changed around us, and these are highly intelligent people. That's only, I only hire faculty who are highly intelligent. So they get it, in an intellectual sense, but, it's hard, when you see how student athletes are being impacted by a really tough decision too.
I'm watching in real time how institutions are making decisions like this. For example, yesterday, Bryn Athyn College, which is located just outside Philadelphia, is announcing they're dropping their entire athletics program next
Right.
year.
Right. Yeah.
So that's another crucial decision that comes with, hopefully reading the landscape, but maybe reading the landscape too late to know what was going on financially. Obviously, it doesn't just impact the athletes, but impacts the full-time staff that's on campus. So how did you approach, certainly for your staff, what their new roles and responsibilities and how their jobs might shift?
Right, right, and here too, the coaching staff and the athletic staff really they heard about this decision an hour before the student athletes, so they were, they too were shocked by this, But what I went to great pains to say to them, and I'm continuing to say is, we hire you not just because you're a D1 coach, but because you're the right mission fit for our students. And so I've said to them, I know that many of you have D in your DNA and you're going to want to leave St. Francis and we will help you in any way that we can. I said, but my hope is that all of you will stay because you're the right fit for the university. You believe in our mission. You're good for our student athletes. So the offer is out there to all of them. If they want to remain as a D3 coach, we're going to keep their base salary the same. Okay, so because we want to run a premier D3 program. These are good, these are great coaches. And if they want to stay, we're enticing them to stay. And I know that's a personal decision and that's career and that's family oriented decision. I respect that. But the offer is on the table for all of them. And then what we've said too is, we're also D1 for one more year because we want to give you runway in case you want to go to another D1 school. So have the best final year you can here. We support that. You'll have the resources. So we're really trying to, to help our coaches the best we can. Because again, this is not a choice that they would have made, certainly. But, we want to do what's right for them. And like I said, I hope everybody stays. But right now it's,
Yeah,
there's still it's too early in that process, to
of course.
that. But that's our motivator is, here again, we hire the right people based on mission. And so if they want to stay and if they want to retool to be a D3 coach, we'd love to have them, and we're saying to them, help us to help you. Let's shape what a D3 school looks like together. Give us input, be a part of that transformation.
So I was just tuning into a webinar from one of the consulting companies that consult with colleges around the country. One of the things that they said, which I thought was kind of interesting, and I had not heard this before, but it said, we think that the NIL landscape, what the media talks about constantly, is laying the groundwork for all parents to expect when their son or daughter goes to college and wants to play a sport, that it will be paid for. Which I thought was an interesting way of thinking about this, because we talk about tuition discounting and trying to, meet the family that way. But is that in your mind a reframing of, well, we're really going to pay you to come here in the form of an academic scholarship?
If someone had said that to me a few years ago, I would have said, "Oh, well, that's certainly a cynical look at things." But however, what you just said sounds like it could start happening tomorrow.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but I think it has created an expectation without a doubt, and one of the motivators in us making the switch is because of the NIL piece. I mean, I mean, I have philosophical problems with the NIL piece, but that's me personally, and that's another that's not for here. But my point is, like, we can't compete with that. I understand like there are things that out there that we can't control, and it's easy, and I'm not in favor of any of our donors giving to an NIL collective for St. Francis. But if they were to choose to do that, I'm certainly not going to stop them. But they would not be able to compete to the level that other schools could,
Yeah.
so we're on the losing end of that. And that's nothing against anyone who would try to start a collective for us. To me, that money is better spent on other things. Again, that's my opinion, but more to the point that when the NIL payments started happening, I had a student, a couple of years ago, when half my basketball team went into the transfer portal 2 years ago, and one of the players, to his credit, landed somewhere I think with a 6-figure NIL deal. I was happy for him, and I'm happy for any 22-year-old or 21-year-old to get that kind of arrangement. I am. But that's when in my heart of hearts, I said, you know what? I'm never going to be able to compete with that. And that was the game changer. And that's when I'm going, okay, and here again, being a small school, you're typically on the losing end of that kind of stuff. But then that's where it goes into philosophy and mission. And if I don't want to be in an arms race, the money is better spent, on people and on other student-centric things versus an arms race. And that's philosophy, and that's controversial for some, but that's
Yeah.
that's philosophy.
Yeah, and we're still seeing the ripple effects from COVID, where Division III athletes have acquired a fifth year in some way, shape, or form, have transferred and moved on to Division I programs, and even, like became contributors. I was watching the College World Series in baseball last year, and I think a team from Tennessee had Division III players on it. Georgia had Division III players on it. So it's not impossible at some point
Right.
in their
Right.
college career.
Right. And too, I've been saying a lot lately, I do not begrudge anybody's success. In other words, if a student is going to leave St. Francis and go be more successful somewhere else, I applaud that. Okay. Because I had a football player who was here, and then he transferred into not one but two more schools, and he was on the football field in the Super Bowl this year playing for the Eagles. He started with us, so it can happen. It
No
does
kidding.
happen, and that's a great tribute to us. We got our name mentioned at the Super Bowl, so I'm happy for the individual student athlete when that happens. But
You
look
have
at
to
it.
tell me who that was on the Eagles team.
I think it's EJ Brown.
AJ Brown?
I'm pretty sure. I'm gonna have to get clarity on the name. I know, shame
Okay,
on me. I should know the name, but
that's okay.
yeah,
You have a lot going on right now. It was him. He was a tremendous athlete for the Eagles. There's no doubt about it. I don't want to go too far in the weeds, but just help us understand the financial considerations here of
sure.
making a move
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, so we
Obviously,
did
you're phasing out scholarships and that type of thing.
right. So we've done a number of what if scenarios
Yeah.
and a lot of different pro formas. Early on in the process, it was, what if we stay D1? What does that look like over the course of years? What if we go to another D1 conference? And then we kind of ruled that out pretty quick just because of escalating costs there. Then we started looking at, what does it look like to be in a D2 conference and then a D3 conference. We spoke verbally about eliminating sports. That conversation lasted about 10 seconds. Okay. So that we ruled that out immediately. But so then within that, once we started zeroing in on the D3 option, we looked at enrollment scenarios. Okay. So it's one thing to say, oh, we're going D3, but our big concern is going to be the enrollment hit this
Mhm.
coming year. So you know, we don't know how many of our student athletes are going to stay for this one more year at D1. I hope everybody does, but there are a lot of students who are going to enter the transfer portal. So we then had to do some scenarios based on, what if this many students stay, this many, et cetera. And because we know our students so well at a small school, then we drilled down really to a very grassroots level, and it's some analysis within that. And that, here again, it's all predictive models, and so we did a number of what if scenarios. But like in our day to day, you don't know who's coming until they show up and stay. So but at least we have a broad sense of what things could look like based on different scenarios. So some of
Yeah.
that. But then when we open the doors in August, we're prepared to respond appropriately depending on the scenario.
Yeah. And it sounds like it was almost a no brainer to look at the pack because of
But
where you are geographically within that. I mean, what's your furthest trip now?
it's going to be, I think, to the Cleveland area, which is only about 3 hours.
Geez, wow. That's
Yeah.
great.
And
Yeah.
it's interesting, and you might be, maybe you'll ask me this question because I know others have. People ask me, why D3 and not D2? And while we did do analysis, the answer comes from a place of mission and not athletics. So
Okay.
when I looked at the membership of various D2 and D3 conferences, what was attractive for me with the pack is that there's so many Catholic and Christian schools in the
Yes.
pack. And so I said to myself, if we're going to do this, let's do it once and do it right. And let's land with people that we want to be with for a long time. And when I look at, the pack schools, those are great mission fit schools. And that's when I said, okay, they're D3, which is great. Let's go there. So that was really, it was the mission piece that tipped the scale.
Yeah, and I think people, if they were considering your Division II move on your behalf, were looking at the PSAC,
Right,
which has
right.
a broad footprint. But there is some tension between public and private institutions in Division II and some Division III conferences too. Did you think about that distinction at all, public versus private?
Sure, sure. And that was one of those things that factored into it as well. And again, being a Catholic school, it's nice to be with other Christian and Catholic
Mhm.
schools. And that's not to say, that oh, we can't be with state schools, because I don't mean it like in black and white terms, because like Central Connecticut State is in the Northeast Conference, and we have a great rivalry and a great friendship with them. But again, and the other piece is looking at it from a rivalry point of view. Our sister school and my alma mater is Franciscan University. They're also in the pack. And not that this is about me, but it's, now that, brings a nice friendly rivalry, between a sister school. But, but no, but really it was the mission of the schools. And then of course the appeal of the geography,
Yeah.
because other conferences would have brought us maybe in a greater swath of Pennsylvania, or brought us more to the east. Whereas, we know now that we're moving solidly into the Pittsburgh market, which is good, but also will have its challenges. But, from a rivalry point of view, it's going to be a lot of fun. From the ability of our students to now to go, they can go to away games a lot easier than they could. It's easier to go to St. Vincent's in Latrobe than it is out to a school in the Boston or Rhode Island area.
Sure.
So our band is excited about that, because our band thinks now, and I know they'll be able to get to some of the away games, and have a good presence there, so they're excited. So there's a lot of pros to being in the pack.
Sure. Yeah, and then that, as you said, is your enrollment recruiting area as
Yeah,
well. That
yeah.
footprint. Yeah,
Yeah.
it
You know,
makes
and,
sense.
and so, on the one hand, from a business point of view, we're going head to head now with certain Pittsburgh schools, because we're competing with other D3 schools in the Pittsburgh area. But, we're going to be competing with somebody. Ultimately, our academic programs, of course, are going to be a great draw. And here again, this is why we want to be a premier D3 program. And we're going to make some good investments in it, because we want to be the champion.
I gotcha. I gotcha. So, as we wrap up our conversation, and you know that there's others listening to this, what pieces of advice might you offer them if they're considering this kind of move?
Don't wait.
Okay.
Yeah. But be smart about it, because this is, people think, if anyone thinks that I woke up in the morning and said, "Hey, let's do something different today," it wasn't that simple, obviously. What I would say to presidents, and to board chairs, you don't want to be the last person to do this. You want, you for the good of one's institution, you want to control your own destiny, and so really, do the work, put the thought in. And some say this is a bold move. Others say it's a necessary move.
Mhm.
So really do what's best for the institution. Do the work first. Do the thorough homework first, and for the good of the institution, do that which needs to be done.
That's a great place to end. I am so grateful. I know it has been a chaotic, busy week for you, but your kindness and your thoughtfulness has resonated through. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom.
Absolutely, Karen. I appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation with you, and thank you so much. I appreciate it.
No problem.